I did 75 hard. That was the first extended sobriety stint that I'd ever done in my life, probably since I was like 16 years old, like the first extended multi-month stretch. And I noticed myself, my constant demeanor was better. I just was a happier, like more well-rounded, less reactive version of myself. And that really caused a crystallization of that's what I want to give to people. Like I want to be able to help others tap into that space that they probably don't even know is possible.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. I can't say enough with regards to how much I appreciate all the feedback, the reviews, and really just another shout out to the incredible roster of guests that have been on the show. Without these guests, the show would not have been what it is today. And so if you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Check out the show notes, pick up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious, and we're going to get right to it today. Today, I have Sam Moore. He's a software sales executive turned beverage entrepreneur. After years of succeeding in the software space, he found himself in the most unhealthy phase of his life, physically and mentally. He set out to establish a healthier relationship with alcohol and created Hazlo, the best tasting, best feeling, and best for you beverage in the non-alcoholic space. He's on a mission to share his experience and help everyone live a happier life. Sam, thank you for joining me.
Of course. So good to be here.
Of course, man. I am very excited to have you on today. Let's kick things off right away. You sent me a shipment of the product, and I was telling you right before this, my wife really, really enjoys it. So first and foremost, thank you for that.
Of course.
But, before we kind of, go into your story, tell us a little bit about the brand. When was it born?
So it's born in a couple different ways. So the idea was born in 2018. The first product was sold in 2021. And then the version that your wife and you are enjoying and what I'm enjoying right now next to me was born last summer. So it's taken a couple different pivots and iterations to get to where we are today.
When did you go full time?
I went full time end of 2020. So
COVID.
Yeah. It was a pandemic decision that I have stuck with, and it's been the best decision I've made in a while. So.
Amazing. All right. So thank you for that context. Let's take a little bit of a step back. So you're in Colorado now. Where are you from originally?
I am from the suburbs of Chicago.
Okay, cool. Tell us a little bit about just your life growing up, anything that we need to know in particular around childhood, anything about your earlier life that just kind of distinguishes you.
Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. My parents are still together and live in the house that I grew up in. I have 3 siblings, so 2 older sisters and a younger brother. Very kind of like picturesque upbringing and family. And my childhood was spent mostly just playing sports. I was big into playing everything, but soccer, basketball, and volleyball were kind of my main 3. And sports and athletics kind of defined my childhood. And I was very good when I was younger, and I progressively got less good as time went on, or comparatively to my competition. And so, yeah, like I said, childhood was very just great and stable. And I think what was the defining characteristic of it was how great it was, but also how I was very unsure of myself. I wasn't the most confident kid. I grew up and was the smallest person in my classes and on the sports fields and everything. So I lacked a lot of confidence that I derived a lot of it from sports and being good at it, which led to some identity crises as I stopped being as good at it. But went to college, studied finance, kind of followed the path of my sisters. Actually, all four of us went to University of Illinois to do our studies, and there I basically did all of the extracurriculars that my sisters told me were a good idea that would make me look good in the eyes of future employers, and that ultimately landed me a job at Ernst & Young. And that's kind of where I got my start in my career, and using the context of our previous conversations, the first kind of real obstacles of my life developed at that point.
Got it. Thank you for that context, and that really helps. I want to go back to that period around trying to define your identity and the crises moments that perhaps came about from that. If you can, elaborate further with regards to where it is that you sought out ways to perhaps compensate for your lack of confidence.
I think, great question. I was very shy. I was very extroverted and bubbly and energetic up until probably like fifth grade. It's kind of the first time I remember having social anxiety or being kind of put in front of groups of people and feeling very uncomfortable. And that was coincided with the time where I was, one of the best soccer players in the area. And I remember just seeing that, like, if the spotlight was on me and I had to say words, I felt very uncomfortable. But if the spotlight was on me and I needed to score a goal or play soccer, that was where I felt the most comfortable. And so I kind of morphed my entire identity around being good at sports and being able to perform with people's eyes on me. So that was kind of it was. I still remember it was probably like fifth grade or sixth grade. I had to get up in front of the class, say something to them, and I remember like just getting beet red and feeling so like trembling over my words and not really saying anything and just counting down the seconds until I got to not be in front of the class and go sit back down. And that really, shifting all of my energy and focus to like wanting to be free on whatever sporting field I was playing on.
It just serves as a reminder. Like when I first met you up until before we recorded this podcast, I never would have thought. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, you're, the face of a brand now. You're clearly having to have conversations in front of groups of people now. You're here on this show right now.
Yeah.
And, if I had to think with regards to some of the things that you may have said on today's episode, I never would have thought that was something that you had to kind of navigate. And you had mentioned you were one of the smallest kids. I mean, that was probably when you were younger. Like, how tall are you now?
I'm 6 foot away. Like 190 pounds. Yeah, exactly. And my growth spurt happened towards like the end of high school. So, but it was up until probably junior year of high school that I was one of the smallest kids in my grade. And so it's funny you call that out because I still think I definitely have elements of my personality and how I feel showing up into situations doesn't necessarily match what other people see a lot of times when they meet me.
Well, is it possible that era of your life gave you some sort of perspective, with regards to how you navigate now, like how it feels to be small amongst other people and perhaps how other people made you feel. And then having that perspective now, whether it's in the business world or in the personal world, whatever it may be. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I 100% think that it impacted it a lot and gave me a lot of perspective. And I actually have a couple friends that we joke about how that era of my life is what gave me my personality, right? Like I when I would walk into a room, no one would notice me unless I gave them a reason to notice me, right? And it's funny how, even just earlier I was talking about not wanting to be in front of a crowd, but I really loved being a part of the group, and so I developed a really good way of quickly building rapport with people and, having an ability to make people laugh in a lot of instances and disarming them. That has definitely helped me later on in life. But in terms of like the perspective, I think one of the things that I think I would give myself credit for is I connect really well with all varieties of people. And I think it is due to the fact that I used to maybe walk into a room and not command the respect or the attention or whatever it may be. And I pay that forward by wanting to give everyone an opportunity to, engage in whatever way they want. And so I think that perspective has definitely helped with that.
Yeah, I mean, two things kind of stand out with regards to that type of scenario. If to me, I could see it implementing an underdog mindset, with regards to how you approach certain things. But the other thing it does is, there are certain things you can't control, such as your height. And, if your height isn't there, especially at a younger age, and you're on the playing field, you need to figure out a way to use that to your advantage, right? Like you need to figure out ways whether, like, if you're not going to be taller than everybody because you can control that, you can be faster than everyone. You could be stronger than everybody, and it forces you to figure out ways to use what you have and ultimately find a new set of strengths that are under your control. And I think that, again, that translates into other areas of your life. And as I'm kind of hearing you talk, and now that I know where you are and what you're doing, I can't help but think about how some of those attributes probably came together in helping you shape the person that you are now.
Yeah, definitely developed a very scrappy mindset. And I remember, being younger, and my dad was very involved. He was a great football player, and went through a very different growth trajectory of me, where he was bigger than everyone when he was younger, and then kind of leveled out as everyone else developed. But I still remember, before like a basketball game, and him, coming to talk to me and basically being like, you can have an off game shooting, but defense doesn't have off games. And it's all about energy and hustle and completely things that are completely within my control. And that lesson, or, him sharing that with me, has really stuck with me in all areas of life, in terms of, the only thing that I can control is showing up early, working really hard, doing all these things that, take out my inherent talents or gifts or whatever it may be, and really trying to maximize whatever I can in every situation.
Absolutely. All right. So now let's go back. So you graduate college, you kick things off at Ernst & Young. What year is this?
That is 2014 is when I graduated college. Yeah.
And are you working as a consultant, or are you working in the accounting arm?
I was in the business advisory program. So it's like their introductory program for the consulting side of the business. I remember it being an incredible euphoric moment when I got the job. Ernst & Young, coincidentally, was the top, like the number one rated company to work for as a recent college grad, like that year that came out. So I thought I reached the pinnacle. I remember my starting salary was like higher than most of my friends, and it just kind of was I thought I made it type of moment. And quickly my perspective on that shifted as I got into my day-to-day life there. But yeah, so I got started, and you work. The program was sold to me in a way where you're in this rotational program where you're going to get experience with all these different clients and all these different types of projects, and learn so much, and kind of become this really well-rounded financial consultant for when you graduate the program three years later. And the reality was a little bit different for me.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and we'll dive into that. But one thing I also want to kind of make sure I ask you about is, talk to me a little bit about your social life as you got older. Once you got a little bit more comfortable, whether it was through college or in your early professional years.
Social life, I always really enjoyed being around people, and I always had a pretty good core group of friends that I felt comfortable around, even if I wasn't as comfortable around like big groups of people. And a lot of that was also facilitated by sports teams, right? I had a built-in kind of just group of people, very like-minded interests, and got along really well. So my high school years always had a good close group of friends, and same with college. And I think in college's senior year of high school into college is really where I felt like I kind of stepped into my own skin. Um, you know, I had a growth spurt. I kind of like became a little bit more comfortable in space, I guess is a way that I would say it. And in college, had a great group of friends, both from the business school and my major, but also I joined a fraternity. I worked at a bar on campus, which, if anyone's familiar with University of Illinois, it is very much a bar-centric social scene. So starting in sophomore year of college through the end of college, I worked at a bar, and I was very, very active and social and outgoing. And I think where a lot of this conversation is going to go, a lot of it revolved around alcohol. So being out and drinking with friends, and that was high school into college into early career. There's pretty much everything socially related revolved around getting drunk with my friends at that time.
So when you kick things off at EY, and you're in this program, and the way that these programs are kind of set up, from my experience, and when I first started, I was in banking at JP Morgan, so kind of similar with regards to the programming, and you find yourself in a way fraternizing with the other people who are joining the program as well. So these are the people that you're hanging out with a lot. Was that the case with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. We, I would be traveling for these projects. So we all stayed at the same hotels. We would go out to dinner together every night. Became very, very close with the group that I was on projects with.
Yeah. And how long were you at UI for?
I lasted 10 months. So,
tell us about that.
Yeah. So, as I alluded to, the reality was a little bit different than what my assumption was going in. And I ended up getting put on a project which was notorious throughout the entire advisory practice of being like the worst project you could be on. Like, I would tell people that I was on, I don't want to use the name of it, but I would tell them what project I was on. They'd be like, "Oh, it gets better," and I was like, "This is interesting." But I thought I was going to be doing like one project for 3 months and then another project, and kind of like going to different places, meeting different people. And I ended up being on that one single project for the entirety of my time at EY. And what made it particularly difficult is it was a very time intensive project. So I had to be there 8 a.m. Monday morning, which meant, if I was flying, I was stationed in Tampa, flying from Chicago, I wouldn't be able to get there by 8 a.m. Monday morning unless I flew out Sunday night. Yeah. So I'd fly out Sunday. I would get there at 8 a.m. Monday morning. We'd have to be there on site until at least 2 p.m. on Friday, meaning I would leave on a flight at like 4 p.m. on Friday, get home to my apartment at like 9 p.m. in Chicago, and would have less than 36 hours to just live my life. And so that entire stretch of time, I didn't cook a single meal for myself, like even at my apartment, because I wouldn't be able to keep really, this is before grocery delivery services were really a thing. So I would just come home. I was eating out every meal. I alluded to alcohol being very present. So like, multiple nights throughout the week, I'm out to dinner with my coworkers and we're drinking. I get home in Chicago, and, you're 22 in Chicago, you're going out the whole time.
Probably hopping off the plane, going.
I would have a friend of mine from high school who was living in our hometown, would take the train, meet me at my front door at 9 p.m. when I would get home from the airport. And for that entire weekend, he would just crash on my couch and we would be, out and about partying. So I was not very consistent working out at all. Like I was eating terribly. I was drinking a bunch. And so I felt really bad all the time physically. And it really weighed on me mentally. And a lot of it was due to the fact that I didn't have the perspective to understand that all of the things that I was doing were leading to me to feel as terrible as I was. And it was such a runaway train that I'd never had a way to like break the cycle. So as soon as I started in the working situation, and, it was going back to the actual work I was doing, it was the most remedial work I could comprehend. And we were, working as an anti-money laundering project. So sounded really like we were stopping terrorists is kind of
It
like what we
sounds
were being
sexier
told.
than it really
Yeah,
is.
exactly. And really what it was is we were working at a bank who used to house cartel, money, but got in trouble. All the cartel's money left, but they were needing to kind of prove to regulators that they were taking it seriously. So they hired a bunch of EY consultants, Accenture consultants. We had like hundreds of us at all these different places. And our job was to basically somebody gets flagged because they wrote a check that was outside of their normal, monetary and transactional history. And I would spend 2 to 5 hours basically searching them on every single Google search, negative news site, everything, just to kind of validate that they're not a part of the cartel and write up a summary. And I did that from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday until 2 p.m. on Friday. And so it's just like the least intellectually stimulating, the most just kind of, I felt like they would have been better off like using a 16-year-old that they maybe gave a little bit of Adderall to, like
Yeah, you don't need someone with a full degree to do that.
And, I became very, disenfranchised might be the word. It was, I would go out to the partners would come in and they would take us to dinner. And again, they would sell us this thing of like, we're stopping terrorism. I chose this line of work because I was in New York when 9/11 happened. It was this whole like grandiose thing. And then I would sit down to work the next day and I'm like, the company is paying Ernst & Young $350 an hour for me to sit here and take screenshots of a Nexus news site. This doesn't compute in my brain. And so, yeah, I was really, not enjoying the work. And I going back to like the mental and the physical state of me was in a really bad place. I was very depressed. I was sleeping, you would think that I was sleeping easy, but I remember I couldn't sleep more than like 4 hours a night. I would wake up with this just like very intense anxiety that I didn't have any, I had no experience with and didn't really know what was happening or why it was happening. And I definitely didn't realize that the eating really unhealthy, not working out and drinking every night was not helping this at all. But yeah, got to the point where, I was in a really, really depressed headspace. And, again, didn't feel comfortable talking to people about it, didn't really know what was happening, but got to a really, really bad headspace, which is what ultimately led me to needing to leave.
So you left?
I did.
Okay.
And that's when, our software sales connection comes into the play. But I was in Tampa on the project, got transferred to LA for the same project, just at a different office. And, it was the weekend in between was Mardi Gras. So I remember flying from Tampa to St. Louis to LA. And the thought of flying to Chicago and then back on Sunday night was just like too much for me to handle at that time. So instead, I ended up going to visit a friend in San Francisco for a weekend. And I remember getting off the plane and going to see him. And he takes me to like Dolores Park. And just, it felt like I was seeing the sun and sunshine and happiness and just like what the world was supposed to look like for the first time. And I left that weekend being like, I don't know what just happened or what I'm going to do here, but that's where I need to be. And that's what I need to be living in San Francisco, probably in the software space is kind of what I left that weekend with. And it happened that a week later, another friend of mine asked me about the trip, told him how incredible it was, how much I saw myself living in San Francisco. And he coincidentally had a cousin who worked at a company called Okta, who he was like, I could introduce you to him, and no guarantees, but it sounds like this is where you want to be. And that's what then led me down the path of leaving UI and joining the software world.
Wow. I love this because there's a lot of parallels between you and me here. One thing that kind of stands out to me that I want to ask you about, at 22, 10 months, you're obviously not the first person to go through it. I went through it. But I guess a lot of times we tell ourselves this story of the fact that we need to suffer in order to earn our stripes, right? Like it's kind of been ingrained, especially when you think about like our generation and some of the messaging that we've heard from older generations. And you don't know what you don't know. And it's easy to assume that everybody else is kind of going through it as well, right? So then it becomes a question of, for lack of a better phrase, like, am I too soft for like walking away early, right? And you know, do I need to suffer a little bit more? Like I ended up kind of, I was in the finance world for 7 years. And look, I've said it before on the show, although I got a lot of good out of it, but I definitely could have left before and probably been happier earlier. But then the other side to the story is that once I left finance for tech, one of the quickest realizations I had was, oh, wow, it didn't have to be that way. And that was, quite an awakening for me. And one of the things that like I do on a one-to-one basis, if I'm speaking to someone who's kind of going through it in the same capacity, is, I make sure to relay that now. It's like, it doesn't have to be this way. And you don't need to be apologetic about it. But, truthfully, I mean, myself, I felt apologetic about it. I felt bad every time I thought about wanting to leave. I felt bad about, not pushing through. So I know how you must have felt when you saw everything when you were in San Francisco, but did you truly believe before you left that it was going to be better, or was it kind of a flyer?
I think it was a flyer. And it's interesting that you bring up the tough it out mentality and am I being too soft? Because I think I definitely had those thoughts. So going back to like the being really close with the EY coworkers, there was a group of us that were all stationed. It was a group of us in Tampa and then a bigger group of us when we all got to LA that hung out all the time. And it was basically like we were in the college dorms again, right? We're working together all day, going back to the same hotels, going out to dinner every night. So we got really, really close. And one of my friends, his name's Miles, when we were, early in the LA days, he had a friend who had developed like a software and was trying to get him to leave EY to go be a co-founder with him. And all we did all day was talk about how much we hated the job, right? Like it was a constant topic of conversation. And I was honestly the main person who like convinced him and reassured him that it was a good idea to leave. I was like, this opportunity seems incredible. We hate this, you're like, and you can always come back. And not that I think that was a little naive to think that we could flip flop that quickly and it would all end up all right. But that was kind of the talk track. And so I had already seen somebody make the decision of like, this is bad. This may be better. Let's go explore. And there's the adage of it is so much easier to give somebody else advice than give yourself advice or have the perspective to do that. And I think the timing of everything allowed me to be like, okay, there was this opportunity. I just told somebody else to go explore that because it could be better than where we are. Here I am in this exact same situation. I should follow that same advice. And it definitely was not as simple as that. I didn't have one conversation. It was a constant, forget. And
It's an internal dialogue that goes on for a while until you get there and until you start to actually see it come to fruition.
Exactly. And the whole time I was going through the interview process took like 2 months. I was not at all, I didn't think, one, I wasn't sure I was going to get the job. Two, I wasn't sure that I would take it. Right. Like I built it up in my brain that the minimum amount of time that I would spend at EY is a year. Because it was tied to our like signing bonus. We got a signing bonus. And if you stay a year, you get to keep it. If you leave in less than a year, you have to pay it back. And I go through this whole process and, I end up getting the job. And I remember I got it on I was called by my future boss on my birthday. So my 23rd birthday in 2015. And he offers me the job and I was like, cool, I'm going to think about it. And that word then got back to my friend's cousin who had been helping me this whole time. And, he's a great guy. I think he might have been motivated a little bit by the referral bonus he was going to get. But he called me and he was like, what's going on? I hear you're waffling. And I'm like, well, I'm like stuff right now I'm kind of like enjoying the time in LA, hanging out with my friends. I'm also, there's this signing bonus that I'm going to wait at least 2 months. And he was like, I'm confused. You told me you hate your job. Do you still hate your job? I was like, oh yeah. He's like, you told me you want to live in San Francisco. Do you still want to live in San Francisco? I was like, yeah. He's like, what are we talking about? And then he hangs up on me. And I remember, I didn't have enough confidence to really like go back at him. I was like, that guy makes a lot of good points. So I ended up accepting the job, kind of got peer pressured into it.
You should have negotiated the sign-on bonus.
Yeah, I should have
Mindset, right?
increased everything. I did negotiate a little bit because I ended up getting paid more than some of my other new hires there. But to go to your point of like being sure that it was going to be better, as soon as I said yes, instant anxiety of like, did I make a huge mistake? I hadn't even told my family that I was thinking about leaving the company, let alone accepting another job and moving to another city. So I had that whole conversation to have with them. And then I ultimately, I get off the plane in San Francisco and I have this vivid memory of in the Uber from the airport to my friend's house who I was going to stay with, looking out and being like, what if I don't like San Francisco? What if I just had been swept away by a fever dream and then completely upended my entire life for something that's not going to be that good. And very quickly that was validated by being unable to find my friend who I was going to live with. His landlord stopped paying their mortgage, so they get foreclosed on. All of them everyone on the lease gets paid like $10,000 to move out. I'm not on the lease. So a week after I get there, they're all moving out. I got nowhere to live. And I end up like just checking into a hostel in the Tenderloin of San Francisco.
Oh my God.
And living in like a bunk bed for a month while I try to find another apartment. And so every morning I'm stepping over whoever slept on the stoop that night, to walk to the office to get paid. It was as you know, like the sales jobs are half salary, half commission. They sold me on my OTE, which was more than I was making before, but I hadn't sold anything yet. So I was making like way less than I was before at a much more expensive city, living in a hostel, trying to find an apartment in San Francisco in 2015. So I had a lot of questions and instant regret on the decision I made to go there.
Jeez. Yeah. No, Jesus. Wow. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I can relate in multiple facets of that. And it's a lot tougher, I think, in San Francisco than like I did it in New York. And when I did it in New York, while tech was always there, definitely not at the level that it was at San Francisco. And it was, I took a flyer as well. Like I took a flyer with the decision as well. I wasn't sure if it was going to pan out. I wasn't sure. I was bought into the narrative, that I was sold previously in the financial services world around, you're not going to make more money anywhere else. You're not going to get the prestige anywhere else. Not that I really cared about the prestige, but it was more so around like the image that they sold you on,
Totally.
especially given how close I was to Wall Street. And so that was always kind of in the back of my mind. But those things, weren't an issue very quickly. And I could say that. But, kind of similar to where I think this episode is going, one of the things that I quickly uncovered is that, regardless of where you are, what industry you are, there's no such thing as a perfect situation. And there's still across industries, certain corporate norms that have yet to be, I guess, kind of openly situated so that everyone can kind of find their place. And so I want to make sure we kind of talk about that. So when you started things off at Okta, talk to me a little bit about how things went after you found a place to live and got settled in.
The first couple months were rough, and then like I genuinely was unable to find an apartment for like 3 months
Wow.
that I was living there.
Was it because rents were just ridiculous, or
his rents are ridiculous? I think this was probably the highest number of people moving to San Francisco at one time. And you'd go to it, like there'd be an open house. And if it was in any way, shape, or form like a place that someone would want to live, we would be one of like 20 groups.
So demand is crazy.
Demand is crazy. And not only 20 groups like going and you're all applying, like people are showing up with checks written for the entire year's rent, like $40,000, just here you go. And I did not have those resources to compete. So it took a little while. And also I think like I was very excited about the life in sales in terms of my input in the work that I do directly leads to what I receive and what I earn. Kind of going back to that, like, the lesson my dad taught me in terms of like defense has no off days. Like I show up earlier than people, I stay later. It's going to work out for me. But it was definitely a learning curve, and realizing that, I was no longer doing remedial work and we were just seen as these upper echelon people in the professional world. I was on a level playing field with everyone, and everyone there was super hungry, super smart. And, I think the great thing, and what we'll get to about Okta, is like this company was on a rocket ship. Like this was, I was there 2 years before it was about to IPO. And this was a well-oiled machine, kind of the darling of Silicon Valley that I didn't really comprehend or appreciate at the time. But I was surrounded by like really, really high caliber people, which, to the point of, where we're going with this, is it was incredible. I think what made it so comfortable for me is the people that I was on the sales development team with, and surrounding myself with and spending time with, I got along with really well. And unlike at Ernst & Young, when I saw some of my superiors and the life they lived and what their work they were doing, where I had no interest in it, the people who were older, who were kind of my mentors at Okta, I was like, wow, you're exactly who I hope to become when I start doing this. So I had a great group of friends, great group of coworkers, and life in San Francisco was exponentially better for me personally. And I think going back to what led to such negative things for me, which was just eating out all the time, drinking all the time, and not really working out, I shifted that entirely. And part of it was because I was instantly in a different tax bracket in terms of my ability to purchase things. So I was eating from home every day. I was meal prepping my lunches. I was going to the gym every day. And so I was able to really transform my life in probably like the first 6 months of being in San Francisco.
Hey, Mile 40 fam. I get asked a lot about my training programs and how I set myself up for success to cross finish lines all over the world. Well, I'm going to let you in on a secret. Recovery is half the battle. And in order to get that recovery, I rely on clean sources of protein. That's why my go-to protein shake is Owen. Only what you need. I have one after every single workout. 100% vegan and plant-based, Owen's plant-based shakes use a multi-source protein blend of pea, pumpkin seed, and flax seeds to include all essential amino acids to promote optimal daily health. Uncompromised taste. Owen brings together the essential elements of advanced nutrition, amazingly clean ingredients, functional superiority, and uncompromised taste. Now go ahead, go to www.liveowen.com. That's spelled LIVEOWYN.com. Use code MILE40 for 20% off your next purchase. Only what you need.
Amazing. No, I mean, it makes a huge difference. And honestly, like, think about it. If you were when you graduated, if you had been offered a sales development trajectory at a company like Okta and offered the EY program at the same time, which one would you have taken?
I definitely would have taken EY.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, like without the context, 100%.
In hindsight, right? And I probably would have done the same exact thing. And so, I call that out because even even to today, I think now like the secret's out, like with regards to where you're going to see more upside potentially. And so, I think it's awesome to kind of like think through that and to kind of like talk about it out loud and to kind of like assess. Cause I think you and I would have done the same exact thing.
Totally. And honestly, now I wouldn't change the thing either, because what it allowed me to do, I think I embraced and enjoyed and endured a lot of the challenges of starting at Okta and living in San Francisco, because I had the context of, I know what the alternative, I know what the cush situation is, quote unquote. And man, did that put me in a bad place. And so this is different, and I'm willing to, tough it out a little bit at the beginning, because I see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I'm the same way as you, and I think that's an important thing to call out here. So now, talk to me a little bit about how things evolved from there. In particular, around you got your footing. When it came to work, talk to me a little bit about the people you were hanging around with, and some of the things as it pertained to how you set yourself up socially in San Francisco.
I mean, working on a sales development team in San Francisco, especially at that time, was a incredible ecosystem of very like-minded people. You were not living there and trying to work in the software space unless you were, programmed a certain way, really somebody who wanted to work hard, and were kind of, motivated by the opportunity to make a lot of money, right? Like there was a lot of that. I am still really close friends with, probably like 10 of the people that I was working with at that time. And we built just like a really cool group. And there was also, we combined ourselves with, a sales development group from LinkedIn. And there was just a bunch of different hodgepodge of young, early 20s people. We were all at the same stage of life and really enjoying and embracing the phase that we were in. And I think what was unique too is 85% were from somewhere else, right? So we were all coming to San Francisco with really no understanding or context of what this was, but like so excited that it was January 12th and it was 72 degrees and we were able to go like enjoy being out with our friends, going to, Chubby Noodle for brunch and listening to 90s hip hop.
I love that. You called out something that I think is important, and I'd love your opinion on this. You talk about one of the things that brings a lot of people together in that ecosystem is, of course, the ability to work hard. It's that hunger. But one of the things that I've realized as well is how much of it is also centered around a drive for money, right? I mean, let's call it what it is. A lot of the people that work in tech sales are driven by money. To the point where, in my experience, I've seen people do things that I would never do in order to, chase down that goal. And so one of the things that I've been conscious of since I've been in the tech world now coming on over 6 years is how to spot out those individuals who are good at their jobs, who are locked in, but who also have that balance, because especially when you've got nothing to lose in your younger 20s, or when you don't have anyone to take care of besides yourself, like you could kind of take a lot more risk there. And so I'm interested in your thought on that, and like maybe what some of the things that you've seen. Especially in San Francisco. Sorry, just to call out, just especially in San Francisco, because I feel like it's got to be even more so over there.
Absolutely. And I mean, based off of everything I've already talked about too, right? It took a certain, mental space in order to land in that place and, be looking around being like, okay, now I'm making $40,000 base salary in a, place where the median income is like 90 to 110, right? And so I'm like below the poverty line, and you're just hungry, ready to go. And you are financially rewarded more and more the better you do. And so very much everyone around that I was with was motivated by that. And I think, to your point, some people took it to a level that I wasn't comfortable with either. But the people who I surrounded myself with were the ones with perspective, and kind of, touching on where we're at. A lot of my friends, this was the second job. The people I was the closest with were the ones that spent a year working. One of them was in sales for the San Diego Padres. The other one kind of worked on the East Coast for like an insurance company. And it was the group that we had were all people who had seen what a different part of the real world was and really appreciated what Okta was giving us, but also knew, let's not drink the Kool-Aid entirely. Let's keep some perspective and know that this is a company that is doing really well and is rewarding us really well, but not to allow our identity to be tethered to we're the best because this company is the best and we're kings of the universe. And there were definitely some people who kind of went to that space and got it kind of wrapped their head up in the clouds in terms of that happening. But yeah, I think it was a lot of intentionally surrounding myself with people who had a similar perspective, people who, going back to, I guess, my earlier years, people that I could connect with personally, that I wanted to be around and have conversations with. And I hadn't really developed a lot of the mindfulness practices that I have now, but I've always been a very curious and introspective and reflective person. And those were the people that I gravitated towards, and decided to, remain really close with. So I personally, and my immediate, surrounding friends were often not the people who were doing egregious things in order to just make a couple more dollars.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's just an important call out, because I think that's another thing that's probably not talked about as much. It's like that there's a spectrum of individuals who are succeeding in different ways in that world, and it's important to call that out, because I didn't realize it until like I started to see it, like. And then I started to draw the parallels from there. So I want to make sure that we get to the birth of Hazlo. Talk to me a little bit about the events leading up to it and how we got there.
Yeah. Well, the idea comes after I'd made a transition from Okta to another software company. And this company was Okta. I joined. It was a late stage startup, was already in discussion about IPOing, right? So very much had already done the 0 to 1 and was just maximizing. And I got to the end of that journey, and I got passed up for a promotion, so I was probably a little like my ego was hurt. And I also just started to see this organization that was scrappy and very much like a bunch of like-minded people trying to build something, to morphing into a legitimate enterprise and having a lot more of
it's a little bit more bureaucratic.
Yeah, exactly. Levels of management, a little bit more bureaucracy. And, that happened around the same time that I got passed up for, it's actually like 3 different promotions that I was going for. And I ended up getting none of them for reasons that didn't make sense. Like it had nothing to do with the work that I had done and the value that I would deliver. It was just other reasons that were happening. And so I decided that I was going to leave, and I ended up finding this company called Solvi, which was, very young. I was the 19th employee there. And what, they developed, now in the days of ChatGPT, we all know like large language models, but they had, they were a couple computer science grads from Carnegie Mellon who had developed this large language model that could ingest information and answer in complete sentences. And it was kind of the new version of a chatbot. Like chatbots were all over the place and really, 0% approval rating from everyone. And we were kind of trying to create this better version of it. And I remember I kind of didn't believe that the software worked when I was going through the interview process, but I ended up being on a conversation with the CEO, Mahesh, and he, in an hour, basically was like, that I will follow that person to the ends of the earth. Like that guy just, talking about the people who I gravitate towards, like just great perspective, such a, just kind, welcoming person who works so hard and is so smart, and just, I was all in. And so I started working there, and it's like basically out of Silicon Valley. We're all in one room. Engineers are here, like executive teams here, sales teams here, and I'm sitting across from Mahesh, the CEO. And I start to like observe him running the business. And this is the first time I'd ever seen somebody up close and personal, like running a business, being a CEO. And as I'm crafting my cold emails, he's, interacting with so many different stakeholders, figuring out which investors to pitch, figuring out what recs we need to open and what role is going to come in and lead to the most meaningful impact to the business to take us to the next level. And I just was like, that's what I want to do. I'm in sales right now. This is fine. I want to run the company. And so I started really like, I'd always been somebody who had aspirations to build something without really knowing that that's what I aspired to do. And as soon as that happened, it was like something flipped in my brain of like, okay, I need to figure out what I'm gonna create. And through that experience with Solvi, I was, one of the first sales hires, ended up being our top producing salesperson a couple years in a row. Was a really great opportunity. And again, being somebody who was motivated financially at that time in my life, was paid very handsomely for the work that I was doing. But I quickly started to notice a trend where I would close a deal and I thought I assumed that I would feel really good and proud and kind of euphoric. And I would fall into like almost a depression after I would close a deal. And it was this thing where I started to like try to look at it and be like, what's happening here? And I realized that I would work so many hours, days, months leading up to this culmination of somebody signing a contract. And the payoff was a line of code going onto their side, a number changing in my bank account, and then starting from zero and doing it all over again. And I was like, I think I just don't have a connection with what I'm selling, what we're doing, and the impact that it's having on people's lives. I think that was, it was a little bit very grandiose. I was a little bit idealistic at that time, but that's kind of what was happening. And so I had this epiphany that I wanted to create something, and a realization that software was not something I really necessarily cared that much about. And so I started just, trying to observe other parts of my life. And one of the things that I was doing a lot at that time was drinking alcohol with my friends. And so that happened to be where I would have ideas discussed with people, but also was like, what if this moment is something that I could create something for? Like this, we're all out at bars, talking, laughing, having a good time. Like, what if what I created aided or impacted this space? And that kind of like led me down the path of ultimately creating Hazlo.
So what year, you said it earlier on the podcast, but what year was it? 2020?
That was 2018 when I started like the ideation phase, and then led me to in 2020 to quit my job and go pursue it.
So for context for the audience, this is a topic that has come up several times on this show, but I'm interested if you can kind of walk us through the non-alc industry, where it stood when you started doing the ideation in 2018, up until 2020, really, just to kind of get an idea, because now, it's a big space. But was it as big in 2018?
No. So like, and to be honest with everyone, I was so far from that space and like even considering it. I guess I'll say it a different way. Alcohol was such a central part of my life and my social life that the concept of not drinking didn't even enter my brain as I was coming up with an idea. So everything I was thinking of involved alcohol still. And 2018, I'm pretty sure Athletic Brewing was created in like 2017. So it was like very around that same time that it started being a part of conversations. But also, I was 26 years old. Like everyone that I was around was drinking and enjoying it. And I think I, at that time, knew that alcohol might impact me differently than other people. Like I noticed myself reaching lows that other people wouldn't reach, either when it was a hangover or just kind of, like depressive episodes that I didn't see occurring other places. And at that time, I had a hunch that alcohol was involved, but I wasn't certain. I didn't have any certainty around that. But as I was creating this idea for what would ultimately become our, non-alcoholic seltzer company, was what if there was a drink that made my hangovers not as bad? Like what if I was able to kind of, create something that would help my body feel better in the moments where I felt the worst. And that was the kernel of the idea that, I started creating. And, ultimately I partnered with a mixologist to develop like a better for you mixer. So something to pair with alcohol, but had all these adaptogens and kind of like, really high quality ingredients that would help your body recover faster, and kind of return to homeostasis. So you're depleted and you're hungover. It was something that would help your body recover a little bit faster. And that was as close as I got to non-alcoholic in 2018 to 2020.
Got it. And I confirmed Athletic Brewing did start in 2017. So
did. Okay.
Yeah. And at the time, what, if anything, did you know about the CPG beverage space?
Nothing. Other than I liked to eat and drink things, I knew nothing. So it was a completely foreign space that I, for some reason, could not stop thinking about, researching, talking to people about. And it happened so much after I came up with the idea in 2018 that by early 2019, I was like, I need to at least go see what this is going to become. And that's when I ended up moving out of San Francisco and moving back to Chicago temporarily to like dedicate myself to creating this product, which it took me a lot longer than I thought I was going to. But yeah, so I knew nothing, but that was part of the excitement for me.
And you were still working full time?
I was, yeah. So yeah, I moved back to Chicago, was working remotely full time, and when I wasn't hanging out with my little brother or my friends in Chicago, I was constantly on phone calls with any human being who would talk to me. I hoped that they would have something to do with the CPG food and beverage space, but a lot of times they were just a random person that a family friend introduced me to. And I just started every single day. I would talk to at least one person that I didn't know, and kind of like share with them what I was working on, what I was thinking about, and try to get their feedback on the idea, feedback on, the product I was developing, but also just try to extract whatever knowledge I could about the space to kind of fill in my picture that was completely blank when I started the process.
At that stage in the game, what is the, I don't want to say the hardest, but I guess what's the biggest roadblock? When you're kind of formulating this idea, specifically in the CPG beverage space, like what is the biggest obstacle at the beginning?
It's interesting you use the term formulating the idea, because formulating the drink was by far the most challenging thing. And I think so many people who get into the CPG space are chefs or people who bake or, are already someone who is used to the creating of a thing to consume. I was not that person. I was purely just an idea guy that, I would make some drinks, but there's a reason why tequila soda became my go-to drink. It was the simplest thing that I could come up with, right? And so I had no appreciation for the complexity of like in food science and just all these different things that happen in the background to lead to I grab a can in a store and open it and drink it. And so that was really like educating myself on that and trying to answer this question of like, how do I make a drink? Like this is the most basic thing in the world. And when I started out, I learned that there's this whole industry of formulators and these people who all they do is they work with people like me that have an idea and they, work with a bunch of different ingredients and flavors and create products. And it's a big industry. Like they charge a lot of money in order to do it. And I was not at that point really confident in what I was doing to like be able to part ways with a large sum of money. So I was trying to find, scrappy ways to go about it. Ended up partnering with somebody in LA who, it was the first time that I kind of got duped, and probably not intentionally by them, but I was just some upstart kid with no knowledge that was willing to sign a contract and pay him some money. And there were other people that he had to go sell to. And so I'm working with this person and they're not really responding, and they're sending me things that they say are what we're talking about, but they taste terrible. And so I spent like about 18 months just like trying and failing to like go from idea to a liquid that I could consume. And then ultimately I meet a friend of a friend of a friend for coffee, who ends up being this James Beard winning mixologist who also consults on the side and formulates drinks. And she's the one, shout out Eden, who ended up creating our first formula. But it was I spent about 2 years just sitting on an idea, trying to make it into something physical and failing over and over again.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about this, because in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking about all the different seltzer brands out there, non-alc, whatever it may be, right? And even a lot of the brands that are selling like the same product, essentially, they taste different. And in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, well, how does this seltzer taste different from that seltzer? Like, what is actually going on in the background to make them, taste distinct? And I never would have thought, in asking you that question, that you would have called out the formulation as being one of the bigger obstacles. But I guess now it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and in total honesty, that was the biggest obstacle until I had discovered other obstacles. And, trying to sell drinks is a very challenging thing too. But I think coming from a space of not knowing anything about the industry, it was a rude awakening to what I thought. I came up with the idea. I thought in 5 months max, I would have a drink that I'm selling and we're crushing. And I'm like on my way to making more money than I ever made in software. Right. And very quickly it was, I realized it was not the case, and took a lot more time and, talking about the toughening it out than what we were talking about earlier. It made me really like question myself. Is this something that I just it's a get rich quick scheme, or like I just have I think this is the easy route. And I was continually tested and needing to answer the question of like, no, this is something that like is deep inside of me that I think I need to see out, and I need to create, and I need to go forward with. And without that 2-year struggle of getting to the liquid, I probably would not be enduring, what it is now, like 5 years of going on 5 years of working on this full time, chipping away, trying to build this business and have it get to a point of being widely distributed and impacting people the way I want it to.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I really love just how open you are being about this, right? Like it's not, this wasn't an overnight success, and that's just really raw. And it's really important for us to hear, right? Like, you admittedly didn't really know what you were doing when you started. You openly failed with certain elements of the process. But it kind of goes back to, again, what your dad said, right? Like owning the controllables. And I love that that's been a consistent theme of this episode. I want to ask, so when you decided to go full time in 2021, what were some of the things that were happening at that point that kind of enabled you to do that?
To continue with the theme, I would love for it to be we were taking off so much that I didn't have time anymore. But it really was, I'd been trying for years. I had this idea that I wanted to create, and looking at working a full-time job and doing this on the side, I kind of had this realization that giving this my leftovers is not getting the results that I want. And I knew that software wasn't a passion of mine. And I knew that I wanted to, give it a fair shot in order to create this product. And so what I made a deal with myself that I was like, as long as I have rent to pay, I will continue to work this job. And if I find a way to have my rent subsidized, then I can go full time. And I kind of I made that deal with myself at the beginning of the pandemic. And then 4 or 5 months later, we're late 2020. I have a conversation with a friend of mine and we get on and he's like, I'm quitting my job tomorrow. And I remember being like, oh, wow. Okay. And then later in that conversation, I was like, why am I not quitting my job tomorrow? And I had the same reason. I have to pay, I have rent to pay. And it just so happened that my lease at the apartment in Chicago was ending that next month. And I was literally about to make my last rent payment to that. I was like, okay, well, once I make that rent payment and I collect my last paycheck, I'm quitting and we're going to do this thing. And so it was just kind of a deal I made with myself without realizing I made the deal. And then when faced with the reality of what that would mean, I didn't balk at it. I decided to go through with it.
So did you move back home?
I did. I temporarily moved back with my parents and, to the suburbs of Chicago. And, I finally had a product, but the pandemic naturally kind of disrupted any plans I had for launching or creating this actual business. And, I was, at that time I was dating someone and, we were, it was not going the direction that we wanted it to. And I was kind of faced with this of, okay, I know that I'm committing to this new phase of life. Is it here in Chicago and is it around these people, or do I need a different environment? And I kind of concluded that I needed a different environment. And that's when the thought of Denver and moving out here and launching the business here came into view. But so yeah, I spent 4 months living at my parents' house, all leading up to moving out to Colorado to go launch this.
Did you have any financial security at that point?
I was very fortunate to, the Okta IPO and the how successful I was at Solvi gave me a little bit of a cushion. And I thought I wouldn't need to even tap into that cushion, but that is the resources that I use to kind of give me a runway, so to speak, in order to see if this would work. And one of the things I did as well, knowing that I was leaving software and ideally not going back to it, I got my real estate license while I was those 4 months that I was living at home. And I learned that once you pass the real estate exam, you have a year. It's good for a year. And I was like, okay, I have a year from today to go move to Colorado, launch this business, prove out that this is something that's viable. And if it doesn't work, worst case scenario, I come home and I'll go into real estate and do something there. So I kind of gave myself a fallback plan before blindly committing to it.
Awesome. I love the way that your mind operates, right? And I also love just the fluid motion of using, it kind of goes back to childhood and kind of being the shortest guy out on the field. And we talked about it earlier, right, with regards to, figuring out ways to distinguish yourself and figuring out ways to arm yourself so that you can be successful in the event there are things that you cannot control, right? And when I think about your background professionally, and I think we both agree that it was a blessing that you had the 10 months at UI just to kind of see what that was like, and then ultimately to move on to the other side of things and then get that revelation in tech and understand, the nuances of working in a faster paced environment, to realizing sitting across from a CEO, I know what I want to do and it's not this. And even just in hearing you answer that last question around getting your real estate license, it's arming yourself in ways to handle the things that you cannot control. My last question, and we're going to be wrapping things up soon, is around when you think about the mission behind Hazlo, and when you think about, I have to presume that a part of it was for personal fulfillment, right? You're trying to find something that you're proud of building, something that gives you a little bit more, fulfillment, as opposed to selling something for someone else, which after a certain period of time, regardless how much money you can make, you still realize you're making someone else richer. And that, after a period of time, you want to own something. But Oslo goes a step further in the sense that you're part of a very important movement that is trying to normalize the fact that whether it's a happy hour setting, whether it's a date, whether it's any type of social event, it's okay for the menu of beverage items to now change and to open up to more functional beverages such as this. So talk to me a little bit about, where that's played a role for you. Was it, on the very first day, part of the intention, or is it something that as the company has been growing and evolving, a piece that's been, really hitting closer to home for you?
I appreciate you asking me that, because I have always aspired to impact people, right? That's kind of, I think that is a common thing with, a lot of individuals being like, I want to have a positive impact on the world in some way. And when I started the business, the first kind of product and the first quote unquote mission was really just solving a problem, right? It was just like, I see a gap in the market, let's go fill that. And, as I've discussed in this conversation already, the alcohol was so omnipresent in my life, honestly, up until and through leaving software and starting this business. And it wasn't until I had kind of separated myself from that world that I even entertained cutting back on my drinking. And the decision that I made personally to, I can't be hungover anymore because I need to be able to wake up at 4 a.m. to go work this farmer's market, or I need to, I know that my Sundays I need to prep for the week leading ahead. And it was really just like a needs-based decision. But as soon as I committed myself to, I did 75 hard. That was the first extended sobriety stint that I'd ever done in my life, probably since I was like 16 years old, like the first extended multi-month stretch. And I noticed myself, my constant demeanor was better. I just was a happier, like more well-rounded, less reactive version of myself. And that really caused a crystallization of, that's what I want to give to people. Like I want to be able to help others tap into that space that they probably don't even know is possible. And at the same time, realizing that the biggest challenge I had at that point when choosing not to drink was going and being around other human beings and feeling okay purchasing something that didn't have alcohol in it, because that was not what a lot of the people around me were doing. And so the mission, what I've committed myself to is helping people live happier lives. And that is, you going to a bar and feeling really great about the fact that they have a non-alcoholic product on the menu that you can purchase, and it tastes good, it makes you feel good, and it's made with good ingredients, right? Those are the three things that we try to nail. And then from a more like broader standpoint of really modeling for other people that they're, as much as society in a lot of ways still makes you assume that you should be drinking alcohol, like there is another way. And if it is something, if you're like myself, where you notice yourself reaching lows after consuming alcohol, or you just don't feel good when you're in that space, knowing that they're like, you can feel better. And that's something that I think I taught myself away from alcohol, at least in terms of the decisions to leave different jobs and put myself in different situations, and noticing that decisions I make lead to feeling differently. But that is ultimately kind of where I see this brand having an impact on many people.
Awesome. I mean, look, that gift of clarity cannot be understated, right? And I think that's really what this is about. Ultimately, it's that understanding that through people such as yourself who are creating products like this, you're enabling people to find presence and to find find and uncover the realization that it's okay, like that it doesn't have to be a certain way. And I think, that was the perfect answer for that. I wouldn't want to double down on that question because you answered it so perfectly, but I will ask, just for the audience, where can they find you?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And, I think it helps when I'm talking to somebody who has sees the world very similar to myself. And so I appreciate that. But so Hazlo is spelled Hazlo. It's a command form of hacer. It means do it. And going back to the days leading in my software space, what got me to ultimately move from San Francisco was seeing the word. It says do it underneath it, and I get full body chills, and I'm like, all right, I gotta go see this through. But yeah, so if you Google search Hazlo, we're the first thing that will pop up. But drinkhazlo.com, drink Hazlo on Instagram, TikTok, everywhere else. Go check us out. And if you are somebody who enjoys really delicious drinks, we're a great fit for you. And if you're somebody who doesn't drink and is looking for an alternative, it's perfect for that as well. And And my name's Sam Moore. It's a very basic name, but if you put Sam Moore Hazlo, I will show up everywhere.
Sam, where is distribution right now?
Right now, we are primarily in Colorado, Illinois, and a little bit of Texas. And we have a couple accounts in Brooklyn, specifically in New York. But we're focused on the Colorado, Illinois, Texas markets right now, and hoping to be more nationally distributed towards the end of next year.
Amazing. Sam, thank you so much for coming on the show, for walking us through. I mean, there are just so many like broader takeaways from this episode that I love. I just can't help but think about the impact of putting together the storylines of your childhood, the overarching theme of the lessons from your dad, to, taking a leap, to being very self-aware during a period in your early 20s where most people are just not self-aware. It says a lot about you. It says a lot about who you are. And it says a lot about, personally, how good I feel that someone like you is leading the charge on something like this. So I just want to say thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Bishoy, for having me and for saying all of that. And, I appreciate you having me on. And we didn't talk as much about your story, but I'm sure your listeners know all about it. And having someone that has, lived your life and has created this space is something that I am very grateful for. And so thank you for having me and for the conversation.
You got it.